let us know who do we have here?
My name's Jody Oostema. I'm the program manager for the University of Utah Science and Engineering Fair. Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex. I've been to ISEF 3 times, 2015, 2016, and 2017. And I'm also the president of the University of Utah Science and Engineering Fair Student Advisory Board.
My name is Shreya Pingali. I went to ISEF once last year in 2018.
Shreya, you're a senior or junior?
Yeah, I'm a senior at West High School.
Alex?
I'm a senior at Hillcrest High School.
And if there's anyone in the audience who's still here who has been to ISEF or done a science fair project, stand up. I see some people sitting down who've done science fair research in their school and made it to the University of Utah too. So I'm going to have Alex give the short, as concise as you can, about your project and what you did, and then I'll have Shreya do hers, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions.
All right, so basically what I did with my project is there's this disease called age-related macular degeneration. It happens as people get older and the blood vessels and certain properties of the eye start deteriorating. And so I wanted to create an automated method to detect this because the current methods of detection are slow and manual or either invasive. And so with these images, they're called retinal fundus images. They're a non-invasive way of looking at these blood vessels in the eye. And so I used machine learning to analyze these retinal blood vessel images, taking an approach called bag of visual words, where it basically looks at different properties of the eye and then trains on these different parameters and then is able to determine if an eye has this disease or not.
Okay. So my project sought to combine the fields of machine learning and cryptography. So ultimately what I did was I chose a particular text encrypting cipher. If you have any experience with classical cryptography, you've played around with text ciphers. I chose a very simple text encrypting cipher and wanted to use machine learning to facilitate the decryption process for the cipher. And ultimately I improved the decryption rate from the generic value of 55% to 75% accuracy.
Cool.
If any of you are like me, you didn't understand a majority of what either one of these students said. What I find interesting about high school science fair, which starts for most students in 5th grade, students work up from 5th through 8th grade to have a project like this in high school, is the students are young enough that they're not jaded yet. And like they talked about in the movie, when teachers say, you can't do that, that's crazy, or you can't do that, or when I try to find mentors for students, and I have a professor at the U that will say, sure, I'll mentor that student if you can get me 9 grad students and $1 million. They don't see that. They see the simple problem that there's something in society or our life that is not working, and they just seek to find an answer for it. And it's the simpleness of the projects they're doing that grad students and professors and researchers and scientists are spending millions of dollars on, and these guys just say, well, it should be really easy. And that's what they do and why they're so amazing and so great to work with. So, go ahead.
So I think if anyone has any questions, just come down to these 2 mics right here, and we'll get started with audience questions. In the meantime, I have quite a few. It's super interesting to me to see this film on the international stage, and then hear kind of what we're doing here in Utah. So could you help locate us in relation to the movie? What is it that you do, and what competitions were you guys in with these projects?
At the beginning, they talked about the fact that there are 425 regional fairs across the globe. The fair at the University of Utah is one of those 425. I saw a student here. You said you went to ISEF. What fair did you go with? Okay, yeah, I work with John and Sherry a lot. So Ogden has a fair. Davis and Weber school districts both have a regional fair. BYU has a fair, and Southern Utah University has a fair. So there are 6 regional fairs in the state of Utah, and students are assigned to one of those regional fairs based on which school district they're in. Since Utah has more school districts than counties, for example, we have all the students in Salt Lake County except for Jordan, who goes to the BYU fair. So we have all the districts in Salt Lake, and then Tooele and Park City that comes to the fair at the U. Students are required to do a fair at their school, and win at their school fair and then advance to their district level, and then the districts send the best projects to the fair at the University of Utah.
Right.
So by the time they come to our fair, they've been to 2 fairs already, 2 qualifying fairs. So ISEF is the best of all of those 425 regional fairs.
Well, I'd love to hear from both of you. Just after watching a film like this, like were there parts of it where you really saw yourself? I mean, could you relate to the students here? And specifically curious, when do you move on to the next project? I mean, you've spent so much time developing these amazing things, and do you just carry this forward into work and life, or you move on to the next thing?
Well, one of the great things about ISEF is that because they represent so many countries, I believe last year they represented 81 countries around the world. It's just such a diverse culmination of people from so many different backgrounds and ethnicities and races, etc. And it's really amazing to meet so many people from all these different backgrounds who all share this passion for science. And another great thing about ISEF is that walking around and looking at all the projects, you don't really understand anyone's project except for yours. Just looking at the titles even, they're so complicated, and everybody's topic is so specialized and so advanced that it's just really incredible how specialized and diverse all of these students are in their areas.
Yeah, I definitely related to a lot of the students, especially during their research process. But I think especially one line stood out when Anjali lost her regional fair, and she said, "I'm just another kid. I'm not anything special." I think that goes for a lot of us. We're just okay. Well, we're pretty good at one area that we've done research in. Like, we don't know a lot about the other research that everyone else is doing, and so I think with our research, what we're basically doing is delving really deep into one area, and then we having general knowledge about all the other areas. So it's not really like anything too difficult in a sense. It's just if you have enough dedication to one area or enough interest in finding something in that area, you can go deep and discover something you want.
So I know, Alex, when you've gone to ISEF 3 times, each year it was a different project based on the eye. But it wasn't all on macular degeneration.
Right. Yeah. So I've been interested in the eye since I was a young child because I grew up with poor eyesight. And so when I started researching seriously in my freshman year, I contacted people at the John A. Moran Eye Center here up at the University of Utah. And so I started doing research under a mentor, Dr. Mary Elizabeth Hartnett, there. And I just tried to find if there were any issues with her lab or that she was experiencing while doing her research. And so, for example, one of my projects was creating an automated method to analyze blood vessels because they were doing it manually in the lab. And so finding those problems within the scientific community and just asking questions to see if there's anything wrong and something that they want to solve is just how I come up with my scientific problems that I want to solve. So.
And do you think you're going to stay in the realm of machine learning? Is that really a core passion of yours?
Yeah, I definitely want to continue to pursue computer science throughout college and other higher education. So I didn't work under a professor for this project, but I did complete a machine learning internship with a professor at the University of Utah the summer prior to starting this project, and that was what really inspired me to pursue machine learning for my science fair project. Regarding the cryptography aspect, I've been interested in cryptography for a very long time, and just sort of a side note to that is if you are thinking of doing a science fair project, it's important to remember that you can do a project on literally any field you want, from music to art. Regardless of what you're interested in, it's always possible to pursue a science fair project in that area. For me, that passion was cryptography, and I wanted to combine what I had learned over the summer in machine learning with what I already had passionate for cryptography.
Again, come down and get on the mics if you have any questions. Otherwise, we are just going to keep going.
I think a lot of times students come up with their ideas based on a problem they see at home. Like Alex said, he had poor eyesight, so he wanted to do some research. The students from Brazil who realized there were 2 people in their small town who had Zika virus, and that terrified her. And they realized they had to find a way to stop that from progressing throughout their community.
Go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about your analysis of the judges and your feelings about how they behaved and what inherent biases they brought to the process?
Yeah, sure.
Who judges the judges?
Me?
So they're all perfect.
No. We have a couple of rogue judges every year who have to have a little talking to, but for the most part, our judges are very professional and great with the students. At the fair at the U, we have over 250 volunteer judges over the 2 days of judging at our fair. Elementary school students are judged 4 times, junior high 5, and high school students are judged 6 times over a 5-hour period.
So with my personal experience with judging, it really depends on each judge that you have. Some judges really know what they're talking about and really know what your research is because they've been working in the field for so long. But then there's also judges that don't really know what you're talking about and haven't had a lot of experience with your research that you're doing. And so when it comes to presenting your project, you have to have this balance of knowing what the judge is knows from their background knowledge, and then trying to get the point across without making it confusing. Because if you confuse the judge, they won't like your project. And so you have to be able to clearly explain what your project is and go into enough depth so that they know you did your project and they know how good it is, but then also don't confuse them. And this goes back to how knowledgeable is the judge with your project. So yeah.
I definitely agree with everything Alex said, and I would add that the judges are all humans, and it's important to be able to appeal to both the human aspect of the judge and the professional aspect. So obviously all of the judges that you get are very specialized in their areas, and they know what they're talking about most of the time, and to different extents, of course. But maybe you'll get a judge who, for example, regarding my project, has a very strong cryptography background, and in such case, I would sort of gear my presentation or my spiel more towards the cryptography side of what I was working on. And it's important to have sort of your speech adaptable to different circumstances and appeal to both the humanitarian aspect of the judge and their scientific side.
Every year at our fair, I'll get half a dozen judges for the senior division projects who will bring me their judge sheet and say, I can't do this, I don't know what this kid has done. And I'll let them turn in their judge sheet and I'll find someone else. But I'll also get them for the junior high students, and the judge will turn the project back in and say, I can't do it. And I'll say, you're 55 years old. The kid's 12. Go back out there and fake it and talk to them and let them teach you what they've learned and what they've done, and you can pull it off. But you're a grown-up. They're a kid. Go. But the judges get really intimidated by what these students have done because, like they've both said, they really immerse themselves in that one topic. And if the judge is unfamiliar with it, the kids can pretty easily go right over their head and talk about things that they don't understand.
So I'm curious along that line. I mean, I'm a non-scientist up here. I feel like we're getting better and better at mainstreaming science. In some ways, we've got things like Radiolab, and we've got people starting to sort of explain things in layman's terms so that poor people like me can understand what's going on. But do you find, for all three of you, that the science fair is a good platform to prepare students as scientists to kind of bridge that world between the rigorous scientific world and also selling their ideas and achieving the change that they want to, because you also have to be kind of entrepreneurial to succeed in the paths that you're going?
A little bit. Our fair has, what Alex mentioned, a student advisory board, where we have students who are on the board who have done science fair at least 2 years in 7th through 9th grade. We have a couple of student advisory board members in the audience, pre and current. One of the things that I have them do is ask for donations and sponsorship for the fair. And we also do an outreach in the spring where they're required to come up with some type of hands-on activity, and we invite the public to come to that event so they can learn to talk about science to everyone from an 8-year-old to a grandmother to their neighbor, people of different understandings of science, so that they can learn to talk about science in all levels so that it is available to everyone. I think math and science have both got a bad rap. I think there's plenty of people who can say, my science teacher hated my guts and I hate science, therefore science is bad. And we need to break up that part where having a poor experience with science as a kid doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And a lot of times parents will, their kids will come home from school and say, I have my science fair packet, and parents freak out. I hate science. Science is so terrible. And what does that pass on to the kids of something that science is bad, math is bad, I don't understand it. But when these kids do these projects that are hands-on, they're not reading about science in a book, they're not reading about rocks in a book. They're going to a mountain, they're collecting water samples in a stream, they're collecting rock samples. It's completely different to understand that, and these kids can explain it and help other people understand it as well. So you tell yours.
Yeah, just to add on to that, what Jody was saying with like, in a classroom you can't really learn, like, through a classroom you learn basically through the teacher, and you don't really get that hands-on experience. And science fair really gives you that option to search for what you want to learn by yourself and have that drive and passion to try to find something that you're interested in. Because science is really about finding your passion and your interests in a specific area. And so science fair is able to allow you to do that and discover something that you want to research yourself. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that science in a classroom is absolutely different from this kind of science that you can perform through science fair. And sort of along that same note, communication in science is extremely important. Like I believe Anjali in the film was talking about how so many students have these really incredible projects, but they aren't able to communicate them adequately to their judges, and that's ultimately what doesn't allow them to succeed through science fair. And it's important to remember that just like the communicative aspect of portraying your project is just as important as the research that you do, sort of along the note of what you were discussing earlier.
And science fair is such a great opportunity to pull in every aspect of education. You can work with your math teacher to create the graphs, you work with your English teacher to make sure everything flows right and you're saying what you want to say. Your public speaking, you're talking to a judge, you're talking to strangers about your projects. It's really a great way to wrap up every single part of education into one project.
Well, I think we've had some really great questions. If there are any more from the audience, this is kind of your last chance. I would love to have people come down and chat with our representatives about their projects a little bit before we wrap up the night. But if you have any final comments, I am curious, kind of before we wrap it. You kind of touched on this a little bit, Alex, but what we saw some examples of students that are really driven to win on this international stage, but the film also pushed back on that and said winning's not the point. You kind of have won if you're working on this level. What's the point for you? What are you pursuing with this work, with this kind of intense, rigorous focus on science at this point in your lives?
Well, as I mentioned, I definitely want to continue to pursue computer science in the future, and I ultimately just did this science fair project because it was a project that I was really passionate about working on, and science fair was a great motivator to do that and to continue working on it, and it just pushed me to actually pursue the project and come to a conclusion and have an engineering goal and fulfill sort of this goal that I was working towards in this project. But I was just really passionate about the fields machine learning and cryptography, and having pursued a couple of smaller projects on my own, I wanted to bring this into the larger scale of science fair and do a full-blown project.
Yeah, so I started scientific research because that's why I want to continue in the future. I'm considering pursuing biomedical computation or informatics. And science fair is just a way for me to start that earlier and get hands-on experience with researching and lab mentors and things like that. And so by pursuing these projects, I'm able to get a feel for what it's going to be like in the future for me. So.
For me, I do this because everything's not as bad as what it is on the news when you're working with kids like this. And the world is not coming into an end. And there are some amazing students who are coming up with ideas to make the world a better place. And I get the joy to work with them. And I've been to ISEF 13 times. And it is not boring yet. It's different every time. There are unique problems that come up. I've had kids with several SRC interviews. It's as scary as what they said. It's awesome to work with these kids, and they're planning our future. They're creating things that will make our future better, and it gives me hope.
Excellent. We've got a final question right here.
Yeah, Alex, tell me about how your efforts are going to be available to us in the public?
So right now, my research is primarily for research purposes in the lab. It's not going to necessarily be available to the public. We're trying to use this research to first model or evaluate how effective a drug is to see if it can treat this disease. And so I'm not sure what the timeline is for it being in public use, because this is primarily for my lab right now.
So check in the Moran Eye Center in about 5 to 10 years, and we'll see where Alex has ended up.
We'll see.
Hey, thank you so much, everyone. Come on down. Let's learn about the projects. Have a good night.